food delivered to our respective food banks around the country. So that was the principle of how it started. And yes, I think to say that the last 4 or 5 days in terms of our food bank operation or online food bank operation it's been an incredible response from the public of New Zealand and the corporate supporters of New Zealand. Incredible.
So you've been really bored by this, Frans. Tim, how much of an increase in demand has there been from families and individuals needing help?
Yeah, look, we are seeing that obviously in patches across the country. I was speaking to someone earlier today who, in a particular food bank, there was at least 150 food parcels or large food parcels given out yesterday for families to help them out for at least 5 days. So that is, again, we've used the word unprecedented many times in our language over the last few days, but that certainly is significant. We normally do around 1,000 to 1,200 food parcels per week across New Zealand. We are thinking, based on what we're seeing at the early stages of demand through responses from the public, through our 0800 number, our website and other inquiries, that number to lift to potentially between 2,000 and 3,000 per week.
Tim, it's great to have you on the program. We'll keep in touch with you and the work the Salvation Army are doing. But finally, before we go, if you want to contribute to that, what's the way to do it?
Well, the easiest way is to go online, wallace.foodbank.org.nz, and it's very easy to follow. Click online, work through the process, and you can give a donation from $30 to $90. There are other cheaper options as well, but we're promoting the small, medium and large family bundle, which we know will help our fellow New Zealanders.
Foodbank.org.nz. Tim Hamilton, thank you very much. Quite the initiative, David. And doesn't the Salvation Army just keep on going?
It surely does. Good on them. And there's a clarity to the thinking, and that's what you want. That's what we need right now. A lot of clarity to the thinking. Making things work.
Yeah.
It's a great website that's got all those options. You can pick a women's bundle or a large family bundle or dairy or breakfast or whatever you like, just depending on how much money you've got. And I love the idea that it goes direct from the supermarket to the food bank, so that which makes it all less contact than people dropping stuff off, which we can't do anymore. So it's great.
Before we
there is a certain benefit. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, keep going, David.
Well, I was going to say there is a certain benefit to this ordeal, and that is that I think we are seeing the benefit of simplifying and reducing and making things more straightforward than they were, and that we can live well or live contentedly with less than we thought we needed. And that lies at the heart of what's trashing our ecosystem right now.
That's been a sentiment that many have echoed and reiterated, hasn't it, Michelle? That sort of sense of living in a different way, whatever that looks like, we don't know.
My garden is always full of fantastic native birds, but they're so much closer to the house than they've been. We've got koutou sitting right outside the kitchen window.
Michelle, David, thank you very much for being with us. Michelle Acorr, David Slack on Thursday's panel. I'm Wallace Chapman with you tomorrow from 3:45 Friday. Checkpoint next. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Haere Akine, did COVID kill the magazine business? The Listener next. North and South are among those gone. Some of our largest companies are looking to cut thousands of jobs too and slash workers' pay by up to 70% just to stay afloat. Air New Zealand goes from 400 domestic flights a day to just 8. Today's numbers, 89 new coronavirus cases, brings our total to 797. The mantra is test, 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 but do we have enough swabs? We talked to a woman with COVID-19 who can't smell or taste a single thing. And listen up, home bakers, more of what you need is on the way.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. GPs are warning testing centres for COVID-19 are at risk of being overwhelmed. The number of coronavirus cases has risen by 89 since yesterday, the biggest daily increase so far, bringing the total to 797. People with COVID symptoms such as cough, sore throats, fever and shortness of breath can ask to be referred for testing after the rules were relaxed this week. The Royal New Zealand College of Practitioners Medical Director Brian Betty says many people now believe they have a right to be tested.
I think there needs to be a streamlining of exactly what the definitions are or who should be tested so that the public have the right expectation on this.
Dr Betty supports wider testing but says the Ministry of Health should refine the COVID-19 case definition. Many doctors say they are at breaking point because they've lost so much income. The College of General Practitioners says nearly two-thirds of the 900 members who responded to a survey yesterday said their hours have been reduced. The college says GPs are seeing fewer patients because there is no sport and hospitals have cancelled elective surgery. In addition, patients are not expecting to pay for consultations done by phone or video link. The college says GPs need government help. Health officials are moving to a wartime method of distributing tests for COVID-19. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says about 100,000 swabs are being sent into the community.
And this is something we've gripped up and are taking a national approach to. We've got over 100,000 swabs in the country and we're sort of moving, as we are in other areas, from what I would call a peacetime distribution system to a wartime distribution system to make sure that the swabs are where they need to be.
Ashley Bloomfield says they're trying to get more resources to the right places. The Prime Minister says she's extraordinarily disappointed a major publishing group has folded without seeking government assistance. Bauer Media, which puts out such magazines as The Listener and Woman's Day, announced today that because of a fall in advertising revenue, it was discontinuing its New Zealand operations. Jacinda Ardern says the government actively sought to assist Bauer and was rejected.
Minister Chris Farfoy spoke to them and asked if they could take up the wage subsidy. They refused. In my view, from what I know of this situation, this appears to have been a decision that has been made that is at the same time as COVID-19, but not because of it.
Jacinda Ardern says she is frankly gutted to see a part of New Zealand's history close its doors. Nurses say an increase in the number of people spitting at them is putting them at higher risk of getting COVID-19. A spokesperson for the nurses' organisation, Kerry Nuku, says a small minority of people are acting out of fear and frustration.
The increased risk of spitting, and I've heard of many cases of nurses being spat at recently, is just unacceptable, but it seems to be a trend that we're seeing, unfortunately, more and more over the last few days.
Kerry Nuku says nurses who are attacked in this way will have to be tested and there's a risk they might have to be stood down from work. She says it shows the need for nurses to have personal protective equipment on hand at all times. The government has announced a leave scheme for essential workers who cannot work because they're part of an at-risk group. Concern had been raised about workers over the age of 70 or who have underlying health conditions being told they wouldn't get paid if they did not work during the lockdown. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the $100 million scheme will be paid at the same rate as the wage subsidy and will be available to essential workers if they need to take time off.
We need to ensure that they have the ability to take leave and are not feeling pressured to come to work. This is to ensure that any essential frontline workers who are vulnerable are now supported to be at home.
Jacinda Ardern says the scheme is also available for workers who have a household member deemed to be at risk. Foreigners will be allowed to travel to get to international airports to allow them to fly home. Tens of thousands are stranded here. They'll be allowed to travel if they have a confirmed flight out of the country. Foreign governments will be allowed to organise charter flights to repatriate their citizens if they can satisfy health requirements. It's expected that the first such flight by Air New Zealand could leave as early as Friday evening. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. On to sport now, and World Rugby is asking all international unions to present their best and worst-case COVID-19 scenarios. New Zealand Rugby is projecting losses of more than $100 million in its worst-case scenario. The head of the sport's global governing body, Bill Beaumont, has told the British newspaper The Daily Mail it's well placed to help in extreme cases, but it's asking all unions to be prepared to work together and explore all possible support from their governments. No decisions have yet been made on the international matches scheduled for July, and Beaumont says they won't be for at least a month. And for New Zealand's leading para swimmers, the 2020 season is on hold until at least September. World Para Swimming has confirmed that all events, including the World Series in Berlin in June, have been postponed. It's hoped events can be rescheduled for later in the year to give swimmers a chance to go through classification before the end of this year. And that's the news.
Experts predict the job market will change.
We've been relying on skilled or cheap overseas labour. That's in the past now.
Especially one of our biggest earners.
Tourism, for example. You've got to be kidding in terms of thinking that tourism is going to be able to recover at all in the next 3 years.
Perhaps we'll see a flood of musicians.
K2 and the section's in a bit of a mess. A few days ago, I couldn't have cared less.
We're still working to bring you all the latest on Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Med Service through to midnight tomorrow Friday. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Waitatapa and Wellington. Cloudy periods, patchy drizzle around Gisborne, coastal Hawke's Bay and Waitatapa, and drizzle developing in Wellington overnight tonight. For the rest of the North Island, mostly fine. Isolated showers for Northland about now, and for Coromandel and eastern Northland late tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, areas of low cloud or fog morning and evening. Mainly fine in the afternoons, but cloud lingers about the coast in the south. Nelson, Buller, Westland and central Otago, fine apart from patches of fog or cloud morning and night. Cloud remains in northern Nelson and Buller tomorrow with isolated showers. Fiordland, fine today, but areas of cloud and some drizzle patches tomorrow. Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods. A few showers developing this afternoon, clearing tomorrow morning, becoming fine later. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. It's nearly 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The media landscape has taken another dramatic turn, with Bauer Media announcing the immediate closure of iconic titles like The Listener, the New Zealand Women's Weekly, Women's Day, Next and North and South. It follows news earlier this week about the immediate closure of Radio Sport, pay cuts at MediaWorks and predicted job losses at NZME. This is all mainly due to a dramatic cut in advertising as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Andrew McRae reports.
I was absolutely staggered, and I think it's an absolute tragedy. I'm really reeling from the news right now.
A former editor of the New Zealand Women's Weekly, Jenny Lynch. She says it's a tragedy that after nearly 90 years, the magazine will likely be lost to its many readers.
I always saw the Weekly as a friend. Even though we produced some very good, gritty stories, our aim really was to give pleasure.
Another former Women's Weekly editor, Fiona Fraser, describes it as one of the darkest days in the media she can remember in recent times.
I've personally shared a lot of tears today for what we've lost, and also for my great friends who are just in so much pain in the media industry today. It's just a devastating, distressing time, and I'm just terribly, terribly sad.
She says the magazine always enjoyed a strong readership, even in tough times.
And I really felt like during this period of time, my hope was that the magazine would lead the charge for all of us during this period and the period that follows it, and help us all get back on our feet to a degree.
Media commentator Bill Ralston is fearful for the survival of other media as the COVID-19 lockdown grip takes hold.
When the government orders the closure of weekly magazines, they don't realise it's a business. That if you can't make money and you're carrying a lot of fixed costs like wages and rent, you're going to go bust.
And he says there's likely to be a snowball effect.
There'll be radio stations closed. There will be the remaining lot of magazines will probably, in private ownership will probably disappear as well. I think you will find that TV3 will really start looking closely at whether it keeps going, simply because there's a lack of advertising revenue there for them. No, it's a very tough time.
Another media commentator, Gavin Ellis, says most media outlets have entered the COVID-19 crisis with virtually no financial reserves behind them. He singles out the New Zealand Herald, which is owned by NZME, as one on shaky ground.
I would anticipate that within a week or two at most, they will have to start making some serious decisions about ceasing, in the interim, not permanently, but temporarily, ceasing their print runs.
He hopes media companies may offer staff temporary layoffs instead of redundancy.
If you go back and look at the way in which our media has progressed over the last few years, they have had progressive redundancies to the point where they are working on minimal staffing levels already. So to further reduce them can only mean serious inroads into their ability to do the basic jobs of holding power to account.
Gavin Ellis says one way or another, New Zealand must find ways to protect its private sector media. He says it might mean a fundamental change to its structure.
Because I think news media will be sustainable, but it won't be hugely profitable. And if it's not profitable, it won't have investors. So I think that maybe we have to look at the rise of a non-profit or basically public service-oriented but privately owned media.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she's disappointed and gutted by the Bauer decision. She says the government actively sought to assist Bauer through these difficult times.
Minister Chris Farfoy spoke to them and asked if they could take up the wage subsidy. They refused. In my view, from what I know of this situation, this appears to have been a decision that has been made that is at the same time as COVID-19, but not because of it.
Jacinda Ardern says the government would have liked to have seen Bauer keep operating through till after the lockdown ends. For Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Meanwhile, it's not just media companies making cuts. Construction and travel companies are slashing wages, and some are axing jobs of thousands of workers as they struggle to keep running in the COVID-19 crisis. Some of the country's biggest companies have also taken desperate steps to stay afloat. But as Sharon Brett-Cowley reports, unions say vulnerable workers are being hit the hardest.
About 9,000 Fletcher building workers will find out by the end of tomorrow whether their pay will fall by up to 70% over 3 months. Wages make up 2/3 of the construction giant's costs, and Chief Executive Ross Taylor says that's all it can afford right now.
That sounds simplistic, but it really did come down to that, and we sort of thought we need to provide support over the 12 weeks, but we can't provide full support, so how do we try and give enough that give people a bit of certainty and some income through that period. There was really a judgment call trying to balance that.
Staff will get 80% of base pay for the next 4 weeks, reducing to 50% for the next month and 30% the month after. Senior executives' pay will be docked by 15%. Mr Taylor says business won't bounce back immediately after lockdown finishes.
You just don't turn a light switch on and then bring everybody back the next day. You know, it'll take a period for us to ramp back up.
Construction firm Down and New Zealand's Chief Executive Steve Killeen is taking a 50% salary cut. His leadership team 30%. His income slumps by 75%.
Which in other words means we're operating at 25% capacity, whilst paying all the wages and bills. This is unsustainable.
In this internal company video, he's asking staff earning more than $50,000 to take a 20% cut.
This is the best shot we've got at keeping the business intact and saving as many jobs as possible. So I ask for your support. I do need your consent, and we'll put a process in place to apply that. But I live in an expectation that we will work on this together, we will come through it together, and we will emerge as a stronger business.
Global outdoor clothing retailer Kathmandu is taking extraordinary steps to stay afloat, raising more than $200 million through a share sale. It's standing down shop and head office staff and crew, and casual work has been halted. Xavier Simone is the chief executive.
We have also implemented a number of other initiatives around people, including ceasing the use of casual staff in retail networks and warehouses in all regions. And senior management across all brands have either been stood down or are taking a 20% salary reduction until further notice. We are consulting with employees around options for team members to continue on a reduced hours and salary basis.
Like many firms, Kathmandu is tapping into the government's wage subsidy scheme. In another drastic move today, Air New Zealand slashed domestic flights by 95% as demand plummets by 99%. At the same time, it's starting to axe up to 3,500 jobs. Auckland Airport's cutting staff pay and hours by 20%. Last week, it laid off 90 contractors and mothballed $2 billion worth of projects. The fallout from the COVID-19 crisis is expected to push unemployment into double-digit figures, with one prediction it could climb to 30%. The head of the Council of Trade Unions, Richard Wagstaff, says workers at many firms, including Fletcher's, won't speak out against the wage cuts because they're afraid they'll lose their jobs.
While they say, if you don't like it, get back to us, the reality is they're just imposing their will on their workforce. They're just saying these are the cuts we're going to make, and basically like it or leave it is the reality. And the average person looking at Fletcher's as a big company would say, they're trying to pass the cost of this all onto their workers, pick up the subsidy from the government, and not pay their way. And it's a big company with a lot of resources, certainly a lot more than their employees have, and they're imposing their will on them unfairly.
That was the head of the Council of Trade Unions, Richard Wagstaff, ending that package from Sharon Brett Kelly. Police have admitted they were caught on the hop when faced with doing home checks on thousands of people arriving here from overseas. Travellers were sent home and being trusted to self-isolate under strict conditions. It turns out they weren't all being checked up on. The Prime Minister has also revealed plans that will help foreigners trapped in New Zealand to get home. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Parliament's Epidemic Committee wrapped up its first week today. A dominant message through the week was more testing in particular was needed, along with a much tougher quarantine regime. People arriving with no symptoms and a plan are sent home, but are not supposed to leave the house or have any contact with anyone else. As a very high-risk group, police were supposed to visit each person within 3 days. Speaking to MPs on his last day as Commissioner, Mike Bush said that was the intent, but it did not happen.
In the initial days, it was very difficult to learn where they were and to ensure that there was compliance.
Commissioner Bush told MPs there are about 4,000 people at home after being told to self-isolate after arriving from overseas. In the past 24 hours, cell phone technology has allowed police to contact almost all of them. The committee chair and National Party leader Simon Bridges questioned how this situation has happened.
And I suppose I'm putting it to you squarely, Commissioner. One, that is not good enough. And two, you've got your priorities wrong, because given that most cases of COVID-19 have come in internationally, it would be much better to focus on that than who's on the beach or what neighbourhood someone's in.
Mike Bush faced further questions at the media briefing, where he explained how the new technology helped them track and check people. The first contact was the police sending a text
saying, look, here's an opportunity for you to engage with us. If you wish to do this, it must be with your consent. Please reply, turn on your location services, and if it's okay with you, we'll be able to monitor where you are.
Simon Bridges says there should be an automatic quarantine for anyone arriving at the border, a system that should have been in place when New Zealand went into lockdown.
I still think, and I would implore the Prime Minister to do it and the Cabinet, to properly quarantine the hundreds that are still coming in across our border, and actually to test them all as well.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says that group, along with other high-risk groups, are being managed, but there is a level of trust.
We are relying on every New Zealander to self-isolate. We are relying on those who have come in contact with COVID cases to self-isolate. We're relying on those who are vulnerable to self-isolate. And so there is a level of faith that we have to have in everyone.
Also today, Cabinet Ministers heeded a call from other countries trying to get their nationals home. Foreign nationals will be allowed to travel domestically, whether by air or land, if they have a confirmed and scheduled international flight out of New Zealand. Foreign governments will be able to organise charter flights to repatriate their citizens if they can satisfy health requirements. Ms Ardern says it's taken a bit of time to make sure this can happen without putting anyone at risk.
The week that we've had in this first week of lockdown has given us the space and capacity to draw up a plan to enable, as seamless as possible, the movement of foreign nationals in order for them to exit New Zealand.
Meanwhile, the government has announced a new scheme for essential workers who need to take leave. From Monday, they'll be able to apply for government wage support. It'll be open to people unable to work from home and needing to self-isolate, or who are at risk of becoming sick with COVID-19, to be paid out at the same rate as the wage subsidy scheme. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And after 6 tonight, we'll have more on the government's plans for repatriation. It is 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme so far this evening, but do let us know what's going on in your workplace. What are you hearing? We have heard tonight that some companies are asking workers to take pay cuts of up to 70%. What's your situation? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Been out smelling the roses with your bubble today? How's that homemade bread tasting? And what about the waft of coffee that would go perfectly with it? Well, imagine for a second what it would be like if your sense of smell and taste disappeared overnight. That's exactly what happened to 23-year-old Sarah Miller shortly before she was diagnosed with COVID-19. Some overseas doctors want the sudden loss of smell and taste to be considered an official symptom of COVID-19. Particularly in people who are not showing any other outward signs of the disease. Sarah is in lockdown in Taranaki, and I asked her via Skype how she knew things weren't right.
I had a headache the day before, and then that persisted till the next day. And then on that day, I lost my sense of smell and taste. And so, yeah, that sort of alerted to me the fact that I definitely could have coronavirus, and I got tested that day. But yeah, it's sort of a weird feeling because it's not like your nose is congested. It's not like you've got a cold. It's just like your nose is completely clear. It's just that you're not sensing any sort of smell, and then you can't taste either because obviously your sense of smell affects your taste a lot.
And so it just happened instantaneously? It wasn't gradual?
Yeah, it was just instantaneously. And then I haven't had anything since, any sort of smell since.
Okay, so what happens when you have a coffee, for example? What can you taste?
No, I can't taste it all, so it just tastes like water, to be honest. My tongue can kind of sense whether something sweet or savoury or just maybe like bitter, but apart from that, there's no taste that comes through or flavour as such, yeah.
So describe what it's like to eat a meal then at the moment.
Well, it's like entirely bland. Fully bland. Doesn't taste like anything. Yeah, it's a very natural sensation for sure.
How utterly bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, like I've tried to smell like my perfumes and hand creams and things, and it's just absolutely nothing comes through.
What have you been told about how long that might last?
Apparently it lasts for about 7 to 14 days, is what the common theme is. And I know somebody who actually has the same symptoms in the UK, and they haven't... Oh, they're sort of just starting to get them back now, so I think it's day 9 for them. Yeah. I've heard that it can actually not come back at all, but that's like in very rare cases. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not too worried, but it's just a little bit annoying. I consider myself really lucky.
So how are you being monitored, and what advice are health officials giving you?
So I've got a nurse who's calling me up every day, and she's just checking on my symptoms. She's just telling me really just to stay self-isolated and then keep my immunity up. Yeah.
So you, I understand, are staying at your aunt and uncle's place, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So are you keeping completely separate from them, or how does it work?
Yeah, I'm completely separate. We're in the same house, but I can access outside and I have my own bathroom. So I'm not actually really going anywhere near them. I'm not in the house where they're sort of living. And then I'm getting my meals delivered to me, so that's pretty nice.
So your bland meals come what, on a tray outside the door or something? Yeah. You just pop your head out and get them?
Yeah, pretty much.
What are you doing to keep your immunity up? What was the advice around that?
They said to have lots of fruit and veggies, like get a lot of sleep, and I've been taking vitamin D3 supplements and getting lots of sun, really, that's it.
So, aside from the really drastic loss of your sense of smell and taste, did you pretty much feel okay?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Nothing really too out of the ordinary, I would say.
And that's Sarah Miller, who has lost her sense of smell and taste due to COVID-19. A Hawke's Bay doctor says the government's call earlier this week to test for the COVID-19 put assessment centres under enormous stress. The doctor says the announcement was made ahead of the Ministry of Health updating its case definition and before more supplies of testing kits had arrived. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
The doctor, who does not want to be named, says the announcement caused confusion at the community-based assessment centre where they work, and it continued to turn people away who did not meet the official case definition. The doctor agrees with wider testing, but says many assessment centres don't have enough swabs to meet demand.
It puts us in the position of being caught between meeting public expectations set by the announcement and still following the guidance from our Ministry of Health. And it was also prior to a large amount of swabs being made available to the community-based assessment centres. Almost everyone seemed to run out of swabs because they were sort of swabbing until their doors closed.
Since the crisis began, only people who had been overseas and those who had been in contact with them were being tested. The government's now decided people with respiratory illnesses should also be tested, but the original case definition remained up on the Ministry of Health website for at least another day. The Hawke's Bay doctor says that led to uneven delivery.
So different assessment centres were doing different things. Some were following the ministry guidelines, probably with the aim of preserving swabs, while others were following public expectation, which was to test everyone with a symptom of COVID. So that meant coughs, sore throats, fever, shortness of breath, which applies to hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders at any one time.
Debbie Ngariwa-Packer is the chief executive of Te Ruranga o Ngāti Ruanui, which owns 2 medical centres in South Taranaki with 10,000 clients. Ms Ngariwa-Packer has consistently championed wider testing, but feels that it is still not being applied.
What we didn't count for is that Taranaki District Health Board had a more of an enforcement mentality to it, and by the time central government clicked on and gave the messaging to the regions, they weren't ready. There's quite a bit of fallout in those that have been sent away, yet our GPs have referred them.
Ms Ngariwa-Packer believes the Hawera Assessment Centre doesn't have the capacity to meet the demand for testing.
We keep asking if you've got everything to be able to bring the numbers through, are you able to receive it? And the answer is no. Because we can fill buses. We can get people who've got influenza signs, who've got all those critical things, and if they've dropped one thing off the criteria list, which I understand they have, then there's probably even more that are eligible to be tested.
Dr Brian Betty is the medical director of the New Zealand Royal College of General Practitioners. He says the college also supports wider testing, but the move has brought its own challenges.
I think one of the problems that has arisen is the expectation that everyone can get access to testing when we still have problems with access to PPE, access to swabs, and the capacity of labs to actually carry out the testing. If that's the case, then some people are going to be disappointed and not be tested.
Dr Betty says the case definition might need to be narrowed.
I think we need to be clear about who should be tested in the present situation. The definition seems to have gone very wide. There's been obviously a call to test or test more. I think there needs to be a streamlining of exactly what the definitions are or who should be tested so that the public have the right expectation on this.
At the government media conference today, the Director General of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, said the Ministry of Health's case definition had now been updated, which should lead to a more consistent approach to testing. Dr Bloomfield said more testing kits were also on the way.
On the swab side of it, again, this is something we've gripped up and are taking a national approach to. We've got over 100,000 swabs in the country, and we're sort of moving, as we are in other areas, from what I would call a peacetime distribution system to a wartime distribution system to make sure that the swabs are where they need to be.
Dr Bloomfield says the government is working towards a national distribution system for swabs and personal protective equipment, and it plans to use the district health boards to funnel that equipment to the 49 community-based assessment centres and 50 medical practices directly involved in testing. The biggest number of tests were done in one day yesterday, 2,563, more than 26,000 tests have now been conducted. Mo te hōtaka o te akiaki nei, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
On Checkpoint on RNZ National, a desperate plea for a mercy flight from 2 New Zealand couples stranded in India. A 500% increase in the demand for flour as New Zealanders go crazy baking bread and cakes. And we're in Dunedin where caregivers, nurses and even a chef have moved in with the rest home's dementia patients for the duration of the lockdown. And some afternoon bubbles to celebrate officially making it to week 2 of lockdown. Love to hear from you, especially on the closure of Bauer Media. Now you can get in touch via text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Meanwhile, here's Paul with the headlines.
Thanks, Lisa. The country's media industry is in shock at the sudden closure of several major magazines. German-owned Bauer Media has announced that because of a fall in advertising revenue, it's discontinuing its New Zealand operations, which include iconic titles like The Listener, The New Zealand Woman's Weekly and North and South. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she's deeply disappointed by a decision that, in her view, has been made at the same time as the COVID-19 outbreak, but not because of it. Foreigners stuck in this country will be allowed to travel domestically to international airports so they can fly home. The government announced today that they can do so if they have a confirmed flight out of New Zealand. Foreign governments will be allowed to organise charter flights to repatriate their citizens if they satisfy health requirements. The government has also announced a leave scheme for people employed in essential services who cannot work because they're part of an at-risk group. They will be paid at the same rate as the wage subsidy. GPs say testing centres for COVID-19 are at risk of being overwhelmed. Since the rules were relaxed this week, people with COVID-like symptoms can ask to be referred for testing. The medical director of the Royal College of General Practitioners, Brian Betty, says unrealistic expectations have been raised, and until there is enough personal protective equipment, test swabs and lab capacity, it's likely people will still be turned away. The number of coronavirus cases has risen by 89 since yesterday, the biggest daily increase so far, bringing the total to 797. And the Christchurch City Council is allowing ratepayers affected financially by COVID-19 to defer their rates payments for up to 6 months. Councillors approved the move during a phone conference today. People renting council buildings will also be given a 3-month rent holiday. The Mayor Leanne Dalzell says this is just the beginning of the council's response. And those are the headlines.
Thanks, Paul, and welcome back to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Let's get to business now with Nona Peltier. Nona, Fletcher Building is saying it expects its operations to survive the economic fallout from COVID-19, but there will be costs. And obviously we've been hearing about the workers. So what's it announced?
Yeah, so we're talking about those 9,000 workers that Fletcher Building has and what they're doing to address those concerns. One of the things they're talking about is paying sort of a scaled down payment schedule, so over some time. Just a second, I think I'm hearing two sounds here. Just technically speaking, just give me a second here, Lisa. I'm just going to turn something off.
Well, bear with you, Nona, while you fiddle around with your home studio there for a second. Nona,
yeah, there you go. We're good to go now.
So you were saying?
Yeah, sorry, I was hearing you twice, Lisa. It's not so good, although you sound great both times. The idea that the company is going to have to deal with all of these staff issues, that makes up about 2/3 of the company's costs. They've done what they can to address some of the others, but definitely that was one thing. And we heard quite a lot of that earlier in our report, which of course would be accessed on the website if people want to hear more details about that. But look, the market was pretty satisfied with it, and the share price reacted by increasing about 1.4%. So that was a fairly positive reaction to the package that was detailed today.
And what else has been happening on the markets today?
No, we talked about Kathmandu doing a capital raise yesterday, that $207 million. Well, the company has now come out of its trading halt. And with, I guess what you'd expect. So we were at $1.12, I believe, the day before the trading halt was announced. Then they came out saying that they were going to do a deal so you can buy a share for 50 cents. Well, we saw that the price was down 28% today to 81 cents. So that's what you probably would expect to see. Interestingly, I looked at how NZME has been faring following the Bauer announcement today, because you would think, gee, how is the market going to react to that? And, it's been a while since I looked at NZME, and that share price ended up 1.6%. But look, there's not much to cheer there. That's at 19. That's 19 cents a share. It was 58 cents a share at the start of the year, and that was already down from when it was issued sometime, I guess, a couple of years ago. So, look, there's nothing to cheer on the media space, and that's pretty daunting to have to face that in this industry. Overall, though, the market ended down 0.6%, which was pretty good after Donald Trump came out earlier overnight and talked about what is a horrific situation facing the the United States economy, with jobs data out later on today. So anyways, we finished down 56 points, 9,871, and which is much better than Australia, which was down about 2%. The Kiwi, little change, 59.3 US cents, 97.4 Australian, and 48.9 British pence. Steady as she goes.
Thanks, Nona. Good to see you. That's Nona Peltier reporting from her home studio there. And we've just heard from Neville. Well, kind of on the same topic that we've been talking about. This is about companies slashing jobs and wages. Neville says we are hearing constantly about wage earners who are being asked to take up to 70% cuts. It would be interesting to know how many of CEOs, CFOs, board members, etc. are also volunteering the same type of cut. I understand the CEO of ANZ has taken a cut, but I'd wager that it's nothing like 70%. I'm sure they could live on 30% of $1 million or 2 or 10. Thanks, Neville. Keep your feedback coming. Text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Home bakers keen to keep busy and fed during the lockdown have pushed demand for flour up 500% for one producer. Champion Flour has 3 mills going around the clock to keep up. But don't worry, there's no supply issue and shoppers should see plenty more on the shelves by early next week. Home bakers or supermarket sales usually account for about 6% of their flour, but with many bakeries and cafes closed up, it's the home kitchen crying out for it. I asked Champion Flour Mill's CEO Bruce Pedden just how hot demand is.
So from our business perspective, we're seeing about a 500% uptake in what we're manufacturing, and that didn't seem to be making a dent in availability on the shelves, So I'm expecting to see that correct itself.
But is that unprecedented as it stands?
Absolutely.
What's the closest you would have ever come to that?
Well, see, that's the interesting thing, because previously, if there has been an event, let's say, it's always been regionalised. So when we had the Christchurch earthquakes, it was a region, and you've never had that demand pressure put on business like we are here, where we're talking a national or even a global event. So we've never experienced this. So we've experienced it in pockets of our business, but not in our total business.
So what do you reckon the deal is, Bruce? Is everyone locked down at home so they want to bake a cake or a loaf of bread? What's the feel you're getting?
I think that's exactly what it is. I think that baking, people are moving back. The cafes aren't open, the restaurants aren't open. We've got children at home. We're locked down, and we're looking to, I suppose, reconnect with that home baking, which is wonderful in the long term. It caught us a little bit unaware in the short term.
So, what sort of extra hours are you having to put in to keep up with that demand until things flatten out a little bit?
So, previously on our packing lines, our retail packing, we would probably run retail packing machines at 2 of our manufacturing sites, probably 30 to 35 hours a week. At the moment, we're running both of those machines for 120 hours. So we've gone from a total of 30 to 35 hours to 240 hours of running those machines.
Blimey. How long can you keep that up for?
Look, what we've seen happen, Lisa, is after the lockdown, and there's been a number of businesses that thought that they would be able to open close. So, bakeries, the little hot bread shops on the corner have closed down. The Some of the bigger manufacturers have closed down, with the government saying that you can't supply coffee and treats out of the oil channel. That's closed down. So we're seeing demand on that commercial side decrease. Therefore, we can continue doing this as long as it takes, because we're just moving from our commercial packing lines to our retail packing lines. And it's easy. We're running our mills 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only time we're closing any of our 3 mills is for preventative maintenance. They're ticking away nicely. There's an ongoing supply of raw materials. I saw an article today, or people talking on Talkback about there's a lack of grain in New Zealand. There's no lack of grain. It's been a very good harvest year. The growers have done a great job.
So, Bruce, just to be clear on that point, you've got raw materials up the wazoo. You can keep going. It's not an issue of supply. It's just keeping up and working out the demand.
Absolutely.
So, for all the home bakers out there, I just want to know: is there a run on a particular type of flour, or they're all in hot demand?
I think that given the level of availability, it's hot demand right across the whole range.
So, Bruce, given the business that you are in, what's your favourite go-to recipe that would involve flour?
Look, unfortunately, I'm a bit of a scone fan, so...
there's nothing unfortunate about that, Bruce.
So I think the simple baking at home is the, going and doing some scones, and whether you're using the high grade, a standard flour, your self-raising, or the Edmund scone mix, you're going to get a very, very nice product out of that.
Scones take a bit of talent. We have someone in our team who's great at making scones, others not so much.
It's a gift, isn't it? Most people want to overwork it.
That's a good tip.
People, my experience in scones is don't overwork it. Chill your water and make sure it goes into a very hot oven.
Are you any good with sponges?
No.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not.
That makes 2 of us. Hey, Bruce, it has been fantastic to talk to you. Best of luck. We appreciate your efforts. And double thumbs up to all the home bakers then, eh?
Exactly. We should see that improved supply certainly by next week, hopefully by the end of this week.
And that's Bruce Pedden of Champion Flour Mills. Now, we have compiled a very small collection of recipes that require no flour. They have been developed especially for you while you wait to replenish your stores. And you can check those recipes out online at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint. And they'll also be on Checkpoint's Facebook page, Twitter and Instagram pages. Maybe you could send us a picture once you've baked some of them. A group of Kiwi tourists stranded in New Delhi who fear they may soon be evicted from their hotel are begging the government for help to get home. The 2 Waikato couples left for India early last month for a group tour, but while everyone else made it back to New Zealand, they say they feel abandoned and a mercy flight is urgently needed. Nita Blake-Person reports.
What should have been the dream trip is now a nightmare for Joe Davidson.
It's untenable to be living like this. And with no end in sight, it is very, very stressful. We're frequently breaking down. In fact, I don't know how I'm managing to talk to you without actually blubbering, because I'm a good blubberer at most of the time.
The Hamilton woman and her husband John left Auckland for a tour of India on March the 12th, around the time the World Health Organization was declaring COVID-19 a pandemic.
We were encouraged. We were told that yes, there was a little bit of coronavirus or COVID-19 in the south of India where we were going. We were totally safe, and that the tour was going ahead, and we were encouraged to catch the plane and come.
Not long into their tour, coronavirus put the brakes on things. It was called off on March 19th. Most of their tour group from Marigold Tours were able to get home. But multiple flight cancellations mean they've been holed up in their 5-star Delhi hotel for nearly 2 weeks, with no clue of when they'll be able to leave.
We look to the future. We build our hopes around a specific event happening, such as leaving on the 6th of April. Now we've got to work towards the 15th of April at the earliest, and that would be our 4th or 5th attempt to get out.
That's Don Stewart. He and his wife Marion are also stuck with the Davidsons, and they're terrified at not being able to get out of India.
I'm in my early 70s. My wife is 69. There are two aspects to that. If we were to get any serious illness, we're not sure how or if we would survive that. I had open heart surgery 11 years ago, and I have medication that I have to take daily. I have enough to keep me going for another 2 or 3 weeks, but after that it will probably run out.
Ms Davidson says it's an incredibly stressful place to be.
We go down to the foyer and we're surrounded by 3 different sorts of police in different coloured uniforms carrying machine guns and asking us to return to our room. But we have to go down to the foyer every now and then to change a bit of money so that we can tip the boys that bring us our supplies for the room.
The group has been told that with India under lockdown, their hotel may soon close, but have been assured that the New Zealand High Commission in Delhi will help them find alternative accommodation. But rather than a hotel, it's a flight home they desperately want. Don Stewart has this message for the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters.
Mr. Peters, please negotiate landing rights if necessary, concessional rights if necessary, to let foreign airlines pick us up and land in New Zealand. Let Air New Zealand fly over here, pick us up, bring back Indian nationals, bring back other people. Just show understanding of our plight. Don't tell us to hunker down. That's useless. We just want to get home.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade says there are about 6,000 New Zealanders registered on its Safe Travel website as travelling overseas. Over a week ago, Winston Peters encouraged those people to stay put, as it was increasingly difficult to get flights home. He said government-assisted flights were being considered, but there was no guarantees they would take place, and consular assistance would be provided where possible. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
In a statement, Craig Williams of Marigold Tours, who operated the group which the Davidsons and the Stewarts had been travelling with, said the risks of the trip were made clear to them before they left, and they were offered a partial refund if they chose not to go. He said he sympathised with their plight at the moment, but ongoing assistance from his company was being provided in New Zealand and India. And MFAT says it's providing consular assistance to ensure the health and well-being of both couples. It says given India's current lockdown, many New Zealanders there are having to safely stay where they are and shelter in place until options to leave become available. It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback, you can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Yes, we have made it through week 1 of lockdown, so we thought we'd celebrate with some afternoon bubbles, the kind you go into isolation with rather than drink. We asked 2 bubbles to keep a daily diary of life in lockdown, the ups and downs and everything in between.
Hi, I'm Tricia Warbridge, a 73-year-old grandmother, although I must admit I'm still getting used to being classified as vulnerable. I'm here in my bubble with my son and his partner in their rambling place outside Wellington. With 2 siblings overseas, he was the one that drew the short straw when it came to what to do about mum.
Let's pause here. Other vital deets. There are 2 cats in this bubble. Patience, we'll see them soon enough. And an early warning, Trisha's a social creature, a moviegoer, cyclist and tramper.
I must admit I'm not ideal lockdown material as I'm pretty sociable and I love being active outdoors.
Hey Gravy fam! And then wave.
Bubble number 2, the normally uber-active Oliver family of Pukakui.
Hi everyone, my name is Lesieli Oliver. I'm a mother of 4, married to my husband Dan. We own a business and I'm also a certified life coach. In our bubble is my husband Dan, our 4 young children. We have 3 girls who are aged 12, 10, 8 and a little boy who is 2.
Hold it here. Kenny's the 2-year-old. Spoiler alert, you will see and hear a bit of him during Lesiali's reports. Lockdown day 1, 09:30, and the Olivers are running with military precision. 3 kids have been doing online lessons already. Dad, he's on a work call, and there's a Lego explosion in the lounge.
I'm sitting here with Kenny, my 2-year-old, trying to entertain him.
Cue cute Kenny to the right of frame. He's rocking an orange tee and pacifier and carrying an unidentified purple toy.
My 3 biggest challenges today will be, the first is my 2-year-old Kenny, trying to keep him entertained as he loves being outside and he loves just being in front of the TV, and I really don't want him to be spending the whole 4 weeks in front of the TV. So I've pulled out all this Lego behind me here, and that will keep us busy for about the first part of the morning. Then he'll take a nap, and then I have to find something else to keep him busy for the last part of the day.
While Lesiali records her video diary, the toddler is motoring around in the background. Challenge 2 is working at home in between being a parent and now their teacher. Challenge 3, keeping the imagination/fear in check.
Last night I had a okay-ish sleep. My husband coughed a couple of times, and that just sent me in paranoia, and I couldn't sleep because I was paranoid about, does he have coronavirus? What would that mean for us if he did? But luckily woke up this morning and he was fine. He was just coughing.
Further south, and by day 2, small things are already taking on big importance.
The highlight of the day was the arrival of our first online supermarket shopping. So there was great excitement as we unpacked it, and an even greater thrill for me when I saw my much-needed toothpaste coming out of the bag. The other priority for the day, boring as it might sound, has been to try and establish some sort of routine so there's a semblance a little bit with our previous life. And mainly to make sure that I'm not still in bed at midday.
Shorthand for maintain standards, clean teeth, rise at an acceptable hour. Got it, Tricia. Same day, different location, and the Olivers are peaking early.
We were baking some Afghans, and I was trying to figure out where the cocoa went, and this is where it went.
Chocolate powder has rained on the entertainment unit and lounge floor. We're talking downpour rather than a light shower. Kenny in his green and red dinosaur tee is cocoa dusted too. His smiley face staring straight to camera. Butter wouldn't melt, but chocolate for sure.
12:22. We actually haven't even had breakfast. Milan, what are you up to?
Take this unique recipe and chuck in a bit of online learning to boot.
It's been really hard to understand. We haven't quite nailed it, but we're getting there. Second part is Kenny, my 2-year-old. He is really bored, not being at school, isn't spending much time outside, so it's really showing, especially in the situation that we had today. And the last thing is the house has been a real mess, but I've just had to let it go because in the 4 weeks we're going to be here, it's not going to be immaculate, but it will be good and clean.
Day 3's going to be great. That's the sound of the kids sifting through a colourful pick and mix of Lego blocks. Leilani Oliver's building her dream coronavirus lockdown house.
Since it's the weekend, we decided to build our dream bedroom, our ideal bedroom for if we had to stay in quarantine because we caught coronavirus.
Just out of Wellington, with Tricia's literal world shrinking, she's launching into a virtual one.
It started this morning with a Zoom meeting with my Saturday bike buddies. So normally at 9 o'clock we're out there cycling around the Wellington waterfront heading for our favourite cafe. I must admit the Zoom meeting was a bit chaotic with 7 talkative ladies all speaking at once.
Remember, just for the lockdown, the 73-year-old is in a cosy bubble of 3 with her camera-shy son and his partner.
Well, we're now into day 4 of the lockdown, and we thought it was time to take a bit of a stock take, just see what was working and what might need tweaking. And with the start of the working week tomorrow for my bubble buddies, it was also important for them to figure out what work and personal spaces they needed.
Translation, are we irritating each other yet?
These discussions went off very amicably, and I'm very happy to say we haven't yet got it on each other's nerves.
4 days in and a squirmy Kenny is barely tolerating this team talk.
We have managed to stay home for the past 4 days. We have not been anywhere. The kids are getting a bit tired of staying at home, so we are about to go for a walk probably sometime today, and we're hoping to go to the supermarket because we desperately need to.
This bubble is on the move. Mum, Dad, the 3 girls walking and Kenny in his buggy. Bliss. Day 5 and things are really ramping up. There's driveway squats with age-appropriate weights, press-ups and burpees. Ugh. And 2-year-old Kenny plays his barbell like a trumpet. Everyone else works up a sweat. Okay. Same day, and 73-year-old Trisha, a keen cyclist, is also on the go.
Just back from my daily cycle ride, which I really try to keep up because there's a lot to raise your spirits. Don't keep filming.
But what a difference a day makes.
I suppose it was inevitable after a few days that initial excitement and novelty value of the lockdown was going to wear off. And today is day 6, and I must say it did feel a bit flat. In fact, the highlight was the arrival of the Easy Buy catalogue.
Time to spice things up with a few bubble extras. 2 identical Tonkinese cats rattling around their vast cat jungle.
We're not just, 3 humans. We're also 2 rather neurotic Tonkinese cats, Audrey and May. And you won't be surprised to know that I can hardly tell the difference between them, so I call them both Audrey May. They do what cats do the world over. They just sleep and eat.
A clue to surviving this lockdown, maybe. For the Oliver family, daytime sleeping, specifically Kenny's afternoon nap, is sweet relief.
Something that is really helping us, and it's actually our saving grace, is that Kenny still sleeps in the afternoon from about 12:30 to 2:33, which means that when he's sleeping we can get stuff done and help the kids out if they have schoolwork to do. So he's just about to go for a sleep now. Say night-night, Kenny. Here, say night-night. Night-night.
Yeah.
Don't forget, like many of you, this husband and wife team is managing homeschooling for 3 girls, amusing a 2-year-old and juggling work. By day 7, is this bubble fever?
Hi everyone. I'm just about to ask Dan a question.
While Lesiali records her daily update, Dan is pretending to tunnel up his nose with all the enthusiasm of a gold prospector, just seconds away from a big find. Take 2. A bright-eyed Dan at his computer describes working from home with 4 kids.
I'd probably be tempted to use the word distracting. Keeping with the D theme, difficult. But also fun.
Dan has a sometimes desk buddy in 2-year-old Kenny who plonks himself down with his own computer. The week has started to drag for pensioner Trisha. She signs off with this delightful confession.
It's beginning to feel a bit like an eternity. In fact, I start to wonder if normal life will ever come back again and what that normal life's going to be like. I find myself in the afternoon increasingly looking at my watch and wonder if I can bring forward happy hour by a bit. But I do find that what started originally out on day 1 as the quite civilised hour of 6 o'clock for a gin and tonic with my bubble buddies has started to degenerate. So first it moved forward to 5:30, then 5 o'clock, and now it's down to 4:30. But I find even more worrying is at 4:30 I'm tending to have the gin and tonic on my own as my bubble buddies claim they've got to keep working. Anyway, cheers.
Cheers indeed, Trisha. Thanks to both Trisha and the Oliver family for keeping those diaries for us. 1 week down and 3 weeks potentially to go. How are you doing? Let us know. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Lots of feedback coming in. I want to read this one from a publisher. This person says, I'm a magazine publisher, 2 cycling lifestyle titles, New Zealand Cycling Journal and NZ Mountain Biker. and agree with current climate of the media. I'm worried as an independent publisher. We only publish quarterly and have mags printed, but can't send magazines out to avid and new readers as cannot courier them. We have digital platforms, but most of our readers prefer the tactile product. With the current climate, we are facing a huge downturn in advertising and spend, and it will be hard to survive. But think if we can appeal to more audiences than ever, as we can inspire people to get outdoors after the lockout and drive domestic tourism. I think the government should offer help to the media and journalism during this time, as it's more important than ever, but we are all facing uncertainty, and global companies such as Facebook and Google take more and more of the ad dollars. Thank you for that bit of feedback. In fact, a lot of you have got in touch around the news that the Bauer publications, well, they're gone as of today. The likes of The Listener, Women's Day, Australian Women's Weekly, that's it for them. This is interesting, though. Penny says that Bauer Media continued to accept my 6-month Listener renewal this week, despite clearly intending to close. Penny reckons this is a blatant breach of the Fair Trading Act, as they're not in receivership. So Penny says, can we assume they will be obliged to give me a refund? Good question. Rosemary says something similar. She says, no mention about a refund for the 31 Women's Day magazines I have subscribed for. Can you check on this for us, she says. Well, Rosemary, we'll hopefully try and get to the bottom of that for you. Another person says, I think the Bauer closure is particularly disappointing, cynical even, with the obvious advantage of the timing of COVID-19. They were in trouble before this. The timing is opportunistic and they have no regard for the local implications. Also on the issue of some companies asking workers to slash their pay, Fletcher's leadership team should take at least a 30% cut. If senior management were decent, it would be 50%, this person says.
RNZ News at 6. I'm Paul Brennan. Good evening. Police have admitted they were caught on the hop when faced with doing home checks on thousands of people arriving here from overseas. Travellers were sent home and being trusted to self-isolate under strict conditions. It turns out they weren't all being checked up on. The National Party is now calling for everyone to be quarantined and tested when they arrive. Leader Simon Bridges says an automatic quarantine should have been in place when the country went into lockdown.
I still think, and I would implore the Prime Minister to do it and the Cabinet, to properly quarantine the hundreds that are still coming in across our border and actually to test them all as well.
Simon Bridges, the National Party leader. Foreigners will be allowed to travel to international airports to fly home. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has announced a plan to enable a safe, orderly exit of the tens of thousands of people stranded here. She says travelling to an airport to fly home will be considered essential.
And therefore able to travel domestically, whether by air or land, when they have a confirmed or scheduled international flight out of New Zealand.
Jacinda Ardern says foreign governments will be allowed to organise charter flights to repatriate their citizens if they can satisfy health requirements. It's expected the first foreign government-organised charter flight operated by Air New Zealand could leave as early as Friday evening. A media commentator fears for the survival of some other media after today's decision by Bauer Media to close magazines, including The Listener and Women's Weekly. Bauer says it's due to the severe economic impact of COVID-19 on its advertising revenue. Bill Ralston says there's likely to be a snowball effect.
There'll be radio stations closed. There will be the remaining lot of magazines will probably, in private ownership will probably disappear as well. I think you will find that TV3 will really start looking closely at whether it keeps going, simply because there's a lack of advertising revenue there for them. No, it's a very tough time.
Bill Ralston says it's unlikely in the current environment that a buyer for the magazines will emerge. General practitioners say their profession is facing a financial crisis because of the lockdown. The Royal New Zealand College of General Practitioners says 600 of 900 members who responded to a survey yesterday said their hours have been reduced. A spokesperson, Brian Betty, says the shift to phone or video consultations has caused a big downturn in income.
Since the move to virtualisation, that is reducing the number of patients who come into surgeries, cash flows through the practice, that is the payment that patients normally give to the practice, have dropped between about 40% and 90%. And that's led to a problem in the sector where practices are starting to become very financially unstable.
Brian Betty says GPs need government help. GPs say the case definition of COVID-19 is now too broad and might need to be refined. The Royal New Zealand College of Practitioners Medical Director Dr. Brian Betty says he supports wider testing, but that the government's call to test has created unrealistic expectations about who could be tested. Dr. Betty says until there is enough personal protective equipment, test swabs and lab capacity, it's likely people will still be turned away. Some district health boards are under more pressure than others as their regions are hit by COVID-19. The Director General of Health confirmed 89 new cases today, bringing the total to 797. Ashley Bloomfield says the numbers will continue to increase and the peak hasn't hit yet.
We're starting to analyse the information about where COVID-19 is in New Zealand, and we know that we've had the most number of cases in the following 4 district health boards: Southern DHB, and that's particularly around the Queenstown area, Waikato, Auckland and Waitemata.
Ashley Bloomfield says they're now looking to work out the rate of testing being done in those COVID-19 hubs. 27 New Zealanders and more than 200 Australians have arrived in Brisbane after a flight from Nepal organised by the Australian government. All but 4 of the New Zealanders will fly home later today. Australia's ambassador to Nepal, Peter Budd, says the country's health system could not cope with the demand if foreigners contracted the coronavirus. It's 4.5 minutes past 6. Sport now, and the New Zealand driver Scott McLaughlin is relishing the ability to keep competing during the global pandemic. Online simulators make motorsport gaming almost as realistic as real race driving. After finishing 4th in the opening race of the IndyCar E-Series, McLaughlin is gearing up for the start of the Supercars E-Series next week. The reigning Supercars champion told Fox Sports simulator racing is quite similar to the real thing.
Obviously, you don't have that physical exertion of driving a supercar, but it's very close. Mentally, it's very challenging, if not harder. It's really interesting.
Scott McLaughlin. And in the golfing world, multiple major winners, Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, are reportedly set to play a coronavirus relief match with Super Bowl winning quarterbacks Tom Brady and Peyton Manning next month. CNBC says the charity match being organised by the PGA Tour and a major broadcaster will be held in an undisclosed location without spectators. And that's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. Tomorrow on 9 to noon, Hauraki Gulf Island residents rail against lockdown-flouting boaties they say are putting them at risk. The Kiwi medical director of Médecins Sans Frontières on combating COVID in some of the most challenging places in the world. Foodstuffs North Island boss Chris Quinn discusses price gouging allegations and indoor family games to counter COVID stir-craziness. Keeping you company and up to date. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast through to midnight tomorrow Friday from our Met service. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington. Cloudy periods. Patchy drizzle about Gisborne, coastal Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Drizzle develops in Wellington overnight tonight. For the rest of the North Island, mostly fine. Isolated showers for Northland and for Coromandel and eastern Northland late tomorrow. Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago and Dunedin, areas of low cloud or fog, morning and evening, mainly fine in the afternoons. Cloud lingers, though, about the coast in the south. Nelson, Buller, Westland and central Otago, fine apart from patches of fog or cloud morning and night. Cloud remains in northern Nelson and Buller tomorrow, isolated showers. Fiordland fine for the rest of today, areas of cloud though, and some drizzle patches tomorrow. Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods, a few showers developing, clearing up in the morning and becoming fine later. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. Nearly 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora anō, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The government is making an exception to the domestic travel rule, allowing foreign nationals to travel by air or land so that they can catch international flights home. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced details of the plan to enable a safe, orderly exit for the tens of thousands of people stranded in New Zealand due to the lockdown and increasingly closing international borders. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
There are around 140,000 international travellers in New Zealand, either on a work, student or visitor visa. Jacinda Ardern says in the first week of the lockdown, it's become clear that many do not have the resources or capacity to properly isolate and they wish to go home.
These are extraordinary circumstances where it just hasn't been possible for us to give any of those individuals the usual hospitality we would want. And so now we're supporting them to get home.
Ms Ardern says the government needed time to plan as smooth an exit operation as possible. Foreign nationals trying to get to international airports will now be considered essential travel.
Someone who's travelling on a domestic flight must have a ticketed international flight within a 24-hour window so that we can be assured they are travelling to get to an international airport in order to leave New Zealand.
Foreign governments will be able to charter flights to repatriate their citizens, provided they meet New Zealand's health requirements. Commercial flights are still available, with capacity due to increase, with the approval of a second daily flight between Doha and Auckland by Qatar Airways. Ms Ardern says no timeframe has been placed on this.
I want to assure foreign nationals that they will have the time to make a plan, make a safe plan for themselves to utilise those commercial options.
The British High Commissioner, Laura Clark, is welcoming the decision. She says one of the biggest issues for UK tourists has been finding a way to international departure points when they are stuck in the South Island or more remote areas.
What we collectively need is a way for people to be able to get to their international point of departure in a way that is compliant with New Zealand's level 4 guidance, so that people can, in a very safe way, without undermining New Zealand's COVID response, be able to get to Auckland Airport to fly on and out and get home.
Ms Clark says the British High Commission is working as quickly as it can to provide financial support to stranded tourists. She says the scale of the challenge is enormous, but help is also available to them from the New Zealand government.
There is a temporary accommodation service that is available for people who are really struggling, and I understand there's also an emergency food grant, a small one that is also available.
But the Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner wants New Zealanders to do more to help tourists stuck here. Sanoa Mali'i Karanini Sumeo says they are in a vulnerable, helpless position through no fault of their own.
As Kiwis, we've said be kind to everyone, including our international visitors. You know, we've got a lot of families who are stuck overseas and can't come home, and we're anxious that whichever country they're in, that they're being looked after and that their safety is also being addressed. So we want to do the same.
Jacinda Ardern says for tourists who are unable to get a flight out, the rules are the same. They must continue to sit tight and remain in their bubble. For Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Meanwhile, Air New Zealand has today slashed its domestic services in response to a 99% decline in demand due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Tourist centres say the move was always on the horizon, but they're hopeful regional flights will return as travel restrictions ease. Timothy Brown has more.
Before COVID-19, Air New Zealand was operating 400 flights a day to 20 domestic destinations. Now on its busiest day, there'll be 8 return flights. Services have been cut to 15 airports, with only Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Nelson and Dunedin still operating. Air New Zealand says it's a temporary measure while the country is at alert level 4. But no one, including Rotorua Lakes Mayor Steve Chadwick, knows what the future holds.
It doesn't have a devastating effect on us. It's a service that's had about 24,000 movements every month, and they've dropped catastrophically. But our airport is sitting there ready to scale up as soon as that's possible, and we don't know what that's going to look like and can't predict it at this stage.
Queenstown Lakes Mayor Jim Bolt is also philosophical about the cuts.
This isn't a surprise to me. I've been expecting this for a few days. There's only a dribble of people coming in and out, and it just makes no economic sense for Air New Zealand to continue flying the routes. As much as I regret it, as much as I'd like to see the service continue, we have to face reality.
Queenstown Airport hosted its last international flight on Saturday, and with no domestic flights in the immediate future, it will sit idle with only a skeleton staff on site from tomorrow. Mr Bolt is sure it's only a temporary measure for the airport, which accounted for 2.3 million passenger movements last year.
When the lockdown is finished, when people are able to travel around again, Air New Zealand will react and they'll start their services again. So look, I'm not concerned that this will have any long-lasting effect.
Air New Zealand declined our requests for interviews today, saying their executives are too busy. In a statement, a spokesperson told RNZ the changes will be reviewed when the government eases the current travel restrictions. And on Twitter, the airline's Chief Revenue Officer, Cam Wallace, gave some insights into what's happening behind the scenes.
The new schedule allows us to stop ghost flights, which is better for our costs, our staff and the environment. The revised domestic schedule is heavily reliant on cargo. Yesterday we carried 163 passengers and 44 crew repositioning.
Tourism industry Aotearoa's Chief Executive, Chris Roberts, says domestic travel will pick up as restrictions taper off.
A lot of domestic tourism happens by ground transport. Usually people jumping in their own vehicle and going somewhere for a visit. So when we are at lower alert levels, that will be possible. And in time, those domestic air flights will come back on as well. So there'll be a gradual recovery in terms of travel around the country for New Zealanders. And of course, the recovery for international visitors will be some way off.
But how strong that recovery will be and whether it'll be enough for regional tourism providers is anyone's guess. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, will this evening hang up his cap for the final time. Mr Bush is retiring from the police after 42 years in the service. He will continue to lead the response to the nationwide lockdown caused by the global COVID-19 pandemic. But from now on, he says he'll be fronting media without the bling of his police issue suit. Earlier, RNZ's police reporter Ben Strang asked him what he's most proud of from his time in the police.
Probably as Commissioner, when I say we've modernised and transformed everything, that takes a lot of work by the leadership of the organisation. I would say that's what I'm most proud of, how we've moved an organisation, shaped the culture, shaped and driven, a new way of leading, how we've used technology to enable everything we need to do and to provide a really modern service for people.
Mike Bush has led the police through a massive culture change in the past 6 years, but has also led a move to embrace technology. While the force hasn't been without controversy in his time as Commissioner, he says he has no regrets.
I will be leaving tonight extremely proud of the organisation, but also proud of what we've been able to achieve. I don't have any regrets. I had a plan when I became Commissioner, and I believe we've achieved everything we set out to do, and it's all about the things I was discussing earlier.
Mike Bush says the past year has been the toughest he's experienced in policing. He says the Christchurch mosque attacks, the Whakaari White Island eruption, and now the COVID-19 pandemic have changed the environment in which the police work. Asked about changes in the wake of those events and if he could see the police routinely arming themselves, he says he doesn't like the idea.
As an organisation, a lot of the people inside the organisation are split on that, but as a leadership team, we don't believe there is any evidence to suggest that arming your police will keep them or the community safer. So what we've got to do is look at the right deployment model, and that's why we're piloting armed response teams to see if they will complement our deployment, keep our people safe so we can keep the community safe. And it is in response to that changing environment we were talking about.
Andy Costa will replace Mike Bush as Commissioner from tomorrow, with the incumbent saying the force is in good hands.
I've worked with Andy since 2008. He was on my leadership team in Counties Manukau. So I've watched his career since then. He's one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. His integrity is of the highest standard, and he'll just take the organisation to the next level. He really believes in what we've been doing. He's been part of that change. So he'll, continue to drive the direction we're going in.
Does he want to give him any advice?
Look, he probably doesn't need any, but the one I give all leaders is when you've got a plan, when you've got a vision, yes, absolutely, listen to those around you, ask the right questions, but never blink.
And lastly, I asked if he thinks he'll miss the job.
Oh, no, I'm definitely going to miss it. I'm going to miss the people inside it, miss the challenges, but it's probably time to think about doing something else. I'll do this current role until we're out the other side of it, and probably my wife and I will then have a bit of a break and have a holiday.
For Checkpoint, Ben Strang.
It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Security guards, nurses and frontline staff at hospitals and other essential services are being spat at by angry members of the public while trying to do their jobs during the lockdown. Unions warn this is putting them at risk of contracting COVID-19, and that puts the rest of us at risk too. Ruth Hill reports.
Even when a nasty respiratory virus is not doing the rounds, spitting at someone is a really gross thing to do. But at the moment, it could be deadly. Kiri Nuku from the Nurses Organisation says the union has been getting more and more reports of nurses being spat at by people trying to infect them, or at least frighten them.
It's just unacceptable, but it seems to be a trend that we're seeing, unfortunately, more and more over the last few days.
Kiri Nuku spoke with a nurse this morning who said she believed the patient who attacked her was acting out of fear.
Ordinarily, this person that they've seen before on many occasions has never behaved in this way. But the fear and the anxiousness, this was just something that was out of character for them.
She says people need to be patient and trust that nurses are doing their best and understand that they are scared too.
People are scared. People want attention here and now. People don't want to wait. If people aren't feeling that you're addressing their concerns right now as a priority, they're not prepared to wait. And so they're drawing attention to themselves. And it's about trying to jump the line in some ways, I guess. But the anxiety, the fear is real.
Kiri Nuku says nurses who are spat at have to fill out an incident form and be tested, and they could end up being stood down if there's a risk they could have been exposed to COVID-19. She says it shows the need for nurses to have enough PPE, that is personal protective equipment, on hand at all times. The Senior Doctors Union has also had reports of attack by spittle. Association of Salaried Medical Specialists Chief Executive Sarah Dalton is also worried spitting incidents could put pressure on PPE supplies.
We need to make sure that people who are just meeting and greeting, directing people through hospitals, they shouldn't need full PPE gear, but obviously if people are going to be being physical in various ways, that means safety gear is going to be diverted away from where it's really needed.
Sarah Dalton says it's already an anxious time for hospital staff without the added stress of being attacked by those people they're trying to help.
Our members are really terrified. They're really putting themselves out there, so they really don't need this. But also, if you're a security guard, you're probably not on very good money and you're being asked to put yourself on the line right at the front door of the hospital. It's a big ask.
Some security guards have told RNZ that spitting incidents have increased since the lockdown at hospitals and supermarkets in particular, where they're having to ask people to wait or turning them away. The Security Association, which represents the industry, is not aware of any particular incidents, but says there is huge pressure on companies with increased demand due to COVID-19. Its Chief Executive, Gary Morrison, says they're looking to fill 500 vacancies nationwide.
We'd expect new people not to be put into frontline roles. They'll be very much in support functions and certainly not in high-risk situations, put it that way.
Mr Morrison says he'd expect employers to give new security guards all the PPE and support they need to safely do their job, which is keeping the public safe. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
To the US, where President Donald Trump says he has no plans to order the whole country to stay at home. There have been more than 900 deaths reported in the past day, the most in a 24-hour period. The total number of cases there has now surpassed 200,000. Almost 90% of the country is now under a stay-at-home order, yet President Trump is resisting a universal order.
States are different, and I understand that Governor of Florida, great Governor Ron DeSantis, issued one today, and that's good, that's great. But there are some states that are different. There are some states that don't have much of a problem.
Yesterday, President Trump's persistent optimism dramatically shifted in tone, saying the US should expect a very, very painful 2 weeks. His health advisors are warning there could be up to 240,000 deaths. And today, Vice President Mike Pence confirmed the US appears to be on a similar trajectory to Italy. He's still blaming China for disguising the severity of the outbreak.
The reality is that we could have been better off if China had been more forthcoming. I mean, the reality is that China's been more transparent with regard to the coronavirus than certainly they were for other infectious diseases over the last 15 years. But what appears evident now is that long before the world learned in December that China was dealing with this, and maybe as much as a month earlier than that the outbreak was real in China.
In Italy, more than 700 people have died in the last day alone. Yet officials believe the rate of new infections may have peaked. Some restrictions have been lifted, although the lockdown has been extended to mid-April. The BBC's Mark Lowen is in Rome.
A glimpse of freedom in Italy's new normal. Parents are now allowed to take their children out for a brief walk if urgent. After 3 weeks of lockdown, it's a breath of liberty, but no more. Welcomed, albeit with apprehension.
We're scared to be outside and a bit spaced out because this lockdown has been our salvation. The measures are working. I'm happy they're in place and we want them to go on.
This eases the tension. We're not used to staying inside the whole day. We need some natural light, and children need some space.
In the UK, there's been another significant rise in the number of deaths. The government's described the virus as an invisible killer that's the biggest threat to the country in decades. Most of them are cases in London, but the threat is everywhere. Here's the BBC's political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
Hilda Churchill, who lived through a pandemic a century ago, the oldest victim at 108. Dr Ardil El-Tuyar, the first medic to pass away. Doreen Hunt, a grandmother who died on Mothering Sunday. More families lose mothers, daughters, fathers and sons. And one of the latest, the fourth medic to lose his life, Dr Alpha Sadhu, who'd returned to work to help. This is his son.
So we said our goodbyes and we just told him to fight for us. And then the next 24 hours, 40 hours, his body just deteriorated. From what they told us, his body shut down. He had organ failure, and he just couldn't fight anymore. I massively admire the people at the NHS and the job that they're doing, because it's no joke. This is a serious virus and people are risking their lives to save people out there.
That report from the BBC's political editor, Laura Koonsberg. Finally tonight, the spread of COVID-19 has been particularly challenging for rest homes, many of which have been under lockdown since early March with a ban on visitors. But staff at the Bradford Manor Rest Home in Dunedin decided to go a step further. Most of them moved in with their residents. Our reporter Logan Church caught up with their team during a break to hear how it was going.
Bradford Manor Rest Home is a 26-bed dementia unit, run by a small, dedicated team of 12. But as COVID-19 began to spread and it was clear the elderly were most vulnerable, manager Michelle Donaldson had to decide how to keep those in her care safe, as well as her staff.
We sort of talked about this and sort of, the idea had gone around as a group what we would do if this scenario came up. So when we had a staff meeting, I said to all the girls, okay, what are we going to do? What do we want to do as a group? And without hesitation, they just said, look, we'll move in.
So 9 did, including caregivers, nurses and even the chef. They are staying in spare rooms in the rest home and sharing communal spaces in the gardens with residents.
We got a roster going, a really good roster. So we've made sure that everybody has a day off and they get some downtime. And obviously their mental health is really important too, because as you can imagine, being in lockdown for 4 weeks is pretty tough.
Manita is one of those living inside. She says it's been important for both staff and the residents to keep a sense of normality, despite what's going on outside being anything but normal.
When we come on shift, we actually wear a uniform so that everybody knows that those are the ones that are on shift to keep the routine going. Because if you didn't do that, you'd probably get a bit confused people seeing us all here all the time. So that's how we distinguish that.
Philippa is the resident cook, and she is keeping busy.
Yeah, it's just like cooking Christmas lunch every day.
But staying away from family is tough. She has 2 boys.
Try not to think about it. I FaceTime them all every night, and my boys read me their books and stuff. It's just the same at being at home, just can't give them the cuddles. And, that's pretty hard.
Although she says staying at the rest home was the best thing to do.
I was probably the first one to say I'm in. My oldest is 18. He has acute COPD. He's only one functioning lung. I couldn't risk bringing it in.
Caregiver JR initially had reservations about living in the workplace.
Like at the start, I thought it would be a bit difficult with just like everyone living in the same space, I guess. But it's been good, like after a few days, just getting used to everyone and having my own little spare time where I go outside and do exercise, so it's been good.
But JR says the residents are coping well with the change.
Yeah, they're going really good. I think they're more settled that we're here because like if we're not on shift, we're just sitting down with them and having time to talk to them and also like taking them for walks and stuff. So I think they're more settled that we're all here together.
Everyone I spoke to at this rest home said their team was like a family anyway and had no problem with being stuck together for at least the next few weeks. Their manager, Michelle, is keeping them in contact with the outside world, including running things like tests to the doctors. She says the support her team has received from their community and the rest of New Zealand has been humbling.
We've had so many emails. We've had, people dropping chocolate off at the gate, and it's just been amazing. We've had 10 pairs of underpants donated to us all as well. We've got our local community policeman that comes up every day, rings the bell just to do a health check on us. He says a welfare check. The support's been, we're overwhelmed by the support we've had from everybody. It's actually kept everybody going.
For Checkpoint, Logan Church. Bradford Manor Rest Home.
Whoops, and before we go, there's an update from the Southern DHB, the Lakes District Hospital, where 2 nurses have tested positive for COVID-19. Good news, they say no further staff at that hospital have tested positive, with around 3 results still pending. They basically tested all of their staff in the end. And Terry's got in touch to say, no, please, not the listener, 3 exclamation marks. I have lived 22 years in New Zealand, and the best 2 things are, number 1, Kim Hill, and 2, the listener. Terry renewed the subscription for 12 months last week, but says, love you too, all of Radio New Zealand. Thanks so much for listening, Terry. We really appreciate your company, and everybody else, thanks for joining us. Back again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government is making an exception to the domestic travel rule, allowing foreign nationals to travel by air or land so they can catch international flights home. Electricity use has dropped sharply since the lockdown began because so many businesses have shut their doors. General practitioners say their profession is facing a financial crisis because of falling income. And media commentators fear for the survival of some other media after today's announcement that magazines like The Listener and The Woman's Weekly are being closed. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Tonight on Nights, Sharam Ariam is back with more musical delights from Iran. Silver Timbre is on the line from somewhere between a rock and a hard place in Estonia. But then, aren't we all? And we separate science, fact and fiction with the McDiarmid Institute's Krista Steenbergen. This evening, dilithium crystals.